Chapter 25 The Battle at Bay. Harry's question was answered at the very next morning. When Hermione's daily prophet arrived, she smoothed it out, gazed for a moment at the front page, and then she gave a yelp that caused everyone in the vicinity to stare at her. What? Said Harry and Ron together. For answer, she spread the newspaper on the table in front of them and pointed at 10 black and white photographs that filled the whole of the front page, 9 showing Wizard's face and the 10th of witches. Some of the people in the photograph were silently jeering, others were tapping their fingers on the frame of their picture, looking insolent. Each picture was captioned with a name and the crime for which the person had been sent to Azkaban. Antonian Dolhau, read the legend beneath a wizard with a long, pale, twisted face, who was sneering up at Harry, convicted of the brutal murder of Gideon and Fabian Privet. Augustus Rookwood, said the caption beneath the pockmarked man with a greasy hair who was leaning against the edge of this picture. Board convicted of leaking Ministry of Magic secret to he who must not be named. But Harry's eye were drawn to the picture of the witch. Her face had leapt out him the moment he had seen the page. She had long dark hair that looked unkempt and staggeringly in the picture, though he had seen it sleek, thick, and shining. She glared up at him through heavily lidded eyes, an arrogant, disdainful smile playing around her thin mouth. Like Sirius, she retained vestige of great good books, but sometime perhaps Azkaban had taken most of her beauty. Bellatrix Lestrange, convicted of the torture and permanent incapacity of Frank and Alice Longbottom. Hermione nudged Harry and pointed at the headline over the picture, which Harry concentrated on Bellatrix. Had not yet read Mass Breakout from Azkaban Ministry Fear back is a rallying point for all Death Eaters. Black, said Harry loudly. Not whispered Hermione desperately. Not so loud, just read it. The Ministry of Magic announced late last night that there has been a mass breakout from Azkaban. Speaking to reporters in his private office, Cornelius Schwartz, Ministers of Magic confirmed that 10 high secured prisoners escaped in the early hours of yesterday evening and that he has already informed the Mughal Prime Minister of the dangerous nature of the individuals. We find ourselves most unfortunately in the same position we were 2.5 years ago when the murderer Sirius Black escaped, said Fudge last night. Nor do we think the two breakouts are unrelated. The escape of this magnitude suggests outside help, and we must remember that Black, as first person ever to break out of Azkaban, will be ideally placed to help others follow in his footsteps. We think it likely that these individuals, who include Black's cousin Bellatrix Lestrange, have relied around Black as their leader. We are, however, doing all we can to round up the criminal and beg the magical community to remain alert and cautious. On no account should any of these individuals be approached. Here you are, Harry, said Ron, looking awestruck. That's why he was happy last night. I don't believe this, snarled Harry. Fudge is blaming the breakout on Sirius. Other options does he have? Said Hermione bitterly. He can hardly say sorry, everyone. Dumbledore warned me this night happened. The Azkaban guard have joined Lord Voldemort. Stop whimpering, Ron. And now Voldemort's worst supporters have broken out too. I mean, he spent a good 6 months telling everyone you and Dumbledore are liars, isn't he? Hermione ripped open the newspaper and began to read the report inside while Harry looked around the great hall. He could not understand why his fellow students were not looking scared or at least discuss the terrible piece of news on the front page. But very few of them looked the newspaper every day like Hermione. There they were all were picking about homework and Quitch, who knew that other rubbish, and outside this wall 10 more Death Eaters had swollen Voldemort's rank. He glanced up at the staff table. It was a different story here. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall were deep in conversation, both looking extremely grave. Professor Sprout had the prompt against a bottle of ketchup and was reading the front page with such concentration that she was not noticing the gentle drip of egg yolk falling into her lap from her stationery spoon. Meanwhile, at the far end of the table, Professor Umbridge was tucking into a bowl of porridge. For once her pouchy toad's eyes were not sweeping the great hall looking for misbehaved students. She scolded as she gulped down her food, and every now and then she shot a malevolent gaze up to the table to where Dumbledore and McGonagall were talking so intently. "Oh my," said Hermione wonderingly, still staring at the newspaper. "What now?" said Harry quickly. He was feeling jumpy. "It's horrible," said Hermione, looking shaken. She folded back page 10 of the newspaper and handed it back to Harry and Ron. Tragic dismiss of Ministry of Magic worker. St. Mungo's Hospital promised a full inquiry last night after Ministry of Magic work. Broderick Board, 49, was discovered dead in his bed, strangely by the potted plant. Lawyers called to the scene were unable to revive Mr. Board, who had been injured in a workplace accident some weeks prior to his death. Healer Miriam Strode, who was in charge of Mr. Board's ward at the time of the incident, has been suspended of full pay and was available for comment yesterday, but a spokeswizard for the hospital said in a statement, St. Mungo's deeply regret the death of Mr. Board, whose health was improving steadily prior to this tragic accident. We have strict guidelines on the decorations permitted on our wards, but it appeared that healers strode busy over the Christmas period overlooked the dangers of the plant on Mr. Board's bedside table. As his speech and mobility improved, Healer Strode encouraged Mr. Board to look after the plant himself, unaware that it was not an innocent flitter bloom, but a cutting of devil's snare, which, when touched by the convalescence, Mr. Board throttled him instantly. St. Mungo's is and yet unable to account for the pressure to the plant on the ward and ask any witch or wizard with information to come forward. Board, said Ron. Board, it rang a bell. We saw him, Hermione whispered in St. Mungo's. Remember? He was in the bed opposite Locust, just lying there, staring at the ceiling, and we saw Devil's Snare arrive. She, said Hiller, said it was a Christmas present. Harry looked back at the story. A feeling of horror was rising like bile in his throat. Wow, how we didn't recognize Devil's Snare. We have seen it before. We could have stopped this from happening. We expect Devil's Snare to turn up in the hospital disguised as a potted plant, said Ron sharply. It's not our fault. Whoever sent it to the block is to blame. They must be real brat. Why didn't they check what they were buying? Oh, come on, Ron, said Hermione shakily. I don't think anyone would Devil's Snare in a pot and not realize it tries to kill whoever touches it. Which this was murder, a clever murder as well. If the plant was sent anonymously, how's anyone ever going to find out who did it? Harry was not thinking about Devil's Snare. He was remembering taking the lift down to the ninth level of ministry on the day on his hearing, and the swallow-faced man who had got in on the atrium level. "I'm at board," he said slowly. "I saw him at the ministry with your dad." Ron's mouth fell open. "I heard Dad talk about him at home. He was unspeakable. He worked in a department of ministries." They looked at one another for a moment, then Hermione pulled the newspaper back toward her closet, glared for a moment at the picture of the 10 escaped Death Eaters on the front, then leapt to her feet. "Where are you going?" said Ron, startled. "To send a letter," said Hermione, swinging her bag onto the shoulder. "It will. I don't know whether, but it's worth trying, and I am the only one who can. I hate it when she does that," grumbled Ron as he and Harry got up from the table and made their own slower way out of the great hall. "Would it kill her to tell us what she's up to for once?" It had taken her about 10 more seconds. "Hey, Hagrid." Hagrid was standing beside the door into the entrance hall, waiting for the crowd of Ravenclaws to pass. He was still as heavily brushed as he had been on the day he had come back from his mission to the Giants, and there was a new cut right across the bridge of his nose. "All right, you two," he said, trying to muster a smile but managing only a kind of pained grimace. "Are you okay?" Hagrid asked Harry, following him as he lumbered after the Ravenclaws. "Fine, fine," said Hagrid with a feeble assumption of eagerness. He waved a hand and narrowed Miss Concussion a frightened look. Professor Victor, who was passing, "Just busy, usual stuff. Lesson to prepare couple of Salamander got scale rot, and I am no probation," he mumbled. "You are on probation," said Ron very loudly, so that many students passing looked around curiously. "Sorry, I mean you are on probation," he whispered. "Yes," said Hagrid. "She know more, and I expect to tell you the truth. You might not have picked up on it, but that inspection didn't go well. You know, anyway." He sighed deeply. "Best go on, rub a bit more chili powder on them. Salamander on their tails be hanging off them next. See you, Harry." Ron. He trudged away out the front doors and down the stone step into the damp ground. Harry watched him go, wondering how much more bad news could stand. The fact that Hagrid was now on probation became commonly knowledge with the school over the next few days, but to Harry's indignation, hardly anyone appeared to be upset about it. Indeed, some people, Draco Malfoy prominent among them, seemed positively gleeful. As for the freakish death of an obscure Department of Ministries employee in St. Mungo's, Harry, Ron and Hermione seemed to be the only people who knew or cared. There was only one topic of conversation in the corridor now: the 10 escaped Death Eaters who story had finally filtered through the school from those few people who read the newspaper. Rumors were flying that some of the convicts had been spotted in Hogsmeade, that they were supposed to be hiding out in the shrinking shack, and that they were going to break into Hogwarts just as Sirius Black had done. Those who came from Wizardian families had grown up hearing the names of the Death Eaters, spoke with almost as much fear as Voldemort's. The crime they had committed during the days of Voldemort's reign of terror were legendary. There were relatives of their victims among the Oxford students who now found themselves the unwilling object of the gruesome sort of reflect fame as they walked the corridor. Susan Bones, who had an uncle, aunt, and cousin who had all died at the hand of one of the 10, said miserable during her eulogy that She now had a good idea what it felt like to be Harry. And I don't know how you stand it. It's horrible, she said bluntly, dumping far too much dragon manure on her tray of screen-shaped seedling, causing them to wriggle and squeak in discomfort. It was true that Harry was the object of much renewed muttering and pointing in the corridor these days, yet he thought that he detected a slightest difference in the tone of Whisper's voice. They sounded curious rather than hostile now, and once or twice he was sure he overheard snatches of conversation that suggest that the speaker were not satisfied with the prophet version of how and why Temple Eaters had managed to break out of Azkaban for stress. In their confusion of fear, these doubts now seemed to be turning to the only other explanation available to them. The one that Harry and Dumbledore had been expounding since this previous year. It was not only the students' mood that had changed, it was now quite common to come across two or three teachers conversing in low, urgent whispers in the corridor, breaking up their conversation the moment they saw a student approaching. They obviously can't talk freely in the staff room anymore, said Hermione in a low voice, as she, Harry, and Ron passed Professor McGonagall, Flitwick, and Sprout huddled together outside the Charms classroom one day. Not with Umbridge there, reckon they know everything new, said Ron, gazing back over his shoulder at three teachers. If they do, we are not going to hear about it, are we? Said Harry angrily. Not after decree. What number are we on now? For new sign had appeared on the house notice board the morning after news of Azkaban breakout. By order of the Sign Inquisitor of Hogwarts, teachers are hereby banned from giving students any information that is not strictly related to the subject they are paid to teach. The above is in accordance with Educational Degree Number 26, signed Dolores Umbridge, High Inquisitor. This latest decree had been the subject of a great number of jokes among the students. Jordan has pointed out to Umbridge that by the turn of new rules, she was not allowed to tell Fred and George off for playing exploding snake in the back of the class. Exploding snakes got nothing to do with defense against the dark art, Professor. That's not information relating to your subject. When Harry next saw Lee, the back of his hand was bleeding rather badly. Harry recommended essence of Myrtla. Harry had thought that the breakout from Azkaban might have humbled Umbridge a little, that she might have been abashed at the catastrophe that had occurred right under her beveled fudge nose. It seemed, however, to have only intensified her furious desire to bring every aspect of life at Hogwarts under her professional control. She seemed determined at the very least to achieve a shaking before long, and the only question was whether it would be Professor Trelawney or Hagrid who went first. Every single deviation and care of magical creature lesson was now conducted in the presence of Umbridge and her keyboard. She lurked by fire in the heavily perfumed tower room, interrupting Professor Trelawney's increasingly hysterical talks with difficult questions about ornithology and heptomology, insisting that she predict students' answers before they gave them, and demanding that she demonstrate her skill at the crystal ball, the tea leaves, and the drawn stone in turn. Harry thought that Professor Trelawney might soon crack under the strain. Several times he passed her in the corridor, itself a very usual occurrence as she generally remained in her own tower room, muttering wildly to herself, wringing her hands and shooting terrified glances over her shoulder, all the time giving off the powerful smell of cooking sherry. If he had not been so worried about Hagrid, he would have felt sorry for her. But if one of them was to be ousted out of job, there could be only one choice for Harry as to who should remain. Unfortunately, Harry could not see that Hagrid was putting up a better show than Trollway, though he seemed to be following Hermione's advice, and that showed them nothing more frightening than a creature indistinguishable from a Jack Russell Terrier, except for its fur tail. Since before Christmas, he also seemed to have lost his nerve. He was oddly distracted and jumpy in lesson, losing the thread of what he was saying while talking to the class, answering questions wrongly and gazing anxiously at Umbridge all the time. He was also more distant with Harry, Ron and Hermione than he had ever been before, expressly forbade them to visit him after dark. If she catch ye, it will be all of your neck on the line, he told them flatly, and said with no desire to do anything that jeopardized his job further. They attend from talking down to his hurt in that evening. It seemed to Harry and that Umbridge was steadily depriving him for everything that made his life at Hogwarts worth living. Visit to Hagrid's house later from Sirius, his firebolt and Quidditch, he took his revenge the only way he had, doubling his efforts for DA. Harry was pleased to see that all of them, even Zacharias Smith, had been spurred to work harder than ever by the new that 10 more Death Eaters were now on the loose. But in nobody was this improvement more pronounced than in Neville. The news of his parents' Tucker's escape had wrought a strange and even slightly alarming change in him. He had not once mentioned his meeting with Harry, Ron and Hermione on the close ward in St. Mungo's and talking their lead from him. They had kept quiet about it too, nor had he said anything on the subject of Bellatrix and her fellow torture escape. In fact, he barely spoke during the meeting anymore, but walked listlessly on every hijinks and countercourse. Harry thought he them his plump face screwed up in concentration, apparently indifferent to injuries or accident, working harder than anyone else in the room. He was improving so fast it was quite unnerving, and when Harry taught them the shield charm, a mean of deflating minor jinx so that they rebound upon the attacker, only Hermione mastered the charm faster than Neville. In fact, Harry would have given a great deal to be making as much progress at occlumency as Neville was making during DA meeting. Harry's session with Snape, which had started badly enough, were not improving. On the contrary, Harry felt he was getting worse with every lesson. Before he had started studying occlumency, his scar had prickled occasionally, usually during the night or years following one of those strange flashes of Voldemort's thought or mood that he experienced every now and then. Nowadays, however, his scar hardly even stopped pickling, and he often felt lurch or anyone's or cheerfulness that were unrelated to what was happening to him at the time, which were always accompanied by a particular painful twinge from his scar. He had the horrible impression that he was slowly turning into a kind of Ariel that was turned into tiny fluctuation in Voldemort's mood, and he was sure he could date his increased sensitivity firmly from his first occlumency lesson with Snape. What was more, he was now dreaming about walking down the corridor toward the entrance or to the Department of Ministries almost every night, dream that always culminated in him standing longingly in front of the black door. Maybe it's a bit like an illness, said Hermione, looking concerned when Harry confided in her and Ron. A fever or something, it has to get worse before it gets better. It's a lesson with Snape. What are making it worse? Said Harry flatly. I'm getting sick of my scar hurting and I'm getting bored walking down to the corridor every night. He rubbed his forehead angrily. I just wish the door would open. I'm sick of standing staring at it. That's not funny, said Hermione sharply. Dumbledore doesn't want you to have dreams about that corridor at all, or he wouldn't have asked Snape to teach you occlumency. You are just going to have to work a bit harder in your lesson. I'm working, said Harry, nettled. You try it sometimes, Snape trying to get inside your head. It's not a bubble or a laugh. You know, maybe, said Ron slowly. Maybe what? Said Hermione rather sharply. Maybe it's not Harry's fault he can't lose his mind, said Ron darkly. What do you mean? Said Hermione. Well, maybe Snape isn't really trying to help Harry. Harry and Hermione stared at him. Ron looked darkly and meaningfully from one to the other. Maybe, he said again in a low voice, he's actually trying to open Harry's mind in a bit wide, make it easier for you know. Shut up, Ron, said Hermione angrily. How many times have you suspected Snape and when you have ever been right? Dumbledore trusts him. He worked for the order. That ought to be enough. He used to be Death Eater, said Ron stubbornly, and we have never seen proof that he really swap-sided. Dumbledore trusts him, Hermione repeated, and if we can't trust Dumbledore, we can't trust anyone. With so much to worry about and so much to do, startling amount of homework that frequently kept the fifth year working until past midnight, secret DA meetings and regular classes with Snape, January seemed to be passing alarmingly fast. Before Harry knew it, February had arrived, bringing with it wetter and warmer weather and the prospect of the second Hogsmeade visit of the year. Harry had very little time to spare on conversation with Charles since they had agreed to visit the village together, but suddenly found himself facing a Valentine's Day spent entirely in her company. On the morning of the 14th, he dressed particularly cheerful. He and Ron arrived at breakfast just in time for the arrival of the post owl. Hedwig was not there. Not that he had expected her, but Hermione was tugging a letter from the beak of unfamiliar brown owl as they sat down. And about time, if it hadn't come today, she had eagerly tearing open the envelope and pulling out a small piece of parchment. Her eyes spanned from left to right, and she read through the message, and grimly pleased expression spread across her face. Listen, Harry, she said, looking up at him. This is really important. Do you think you could meet me in Three Broomstick around midday? Well, I don't know, said Harry dubiously. Chow might be expecting me to spend the whole day with her. We never said what we are going to do. Well, bring her along if you must, said Hermione urgently, but will you come? Well, all right, but why? I haven't got time to tell you now. I have got to answer the quickly. As she hurried out of Great Hall, the letter clutched in one hand and a piece of uneaten toast in the other. Are you coming? Harry asked Ron, but he shook his head looking glum. I can't come into Hogsmeade at all. Angelina wants a full day's training like it's going to help. We are the worst team I have ever seen. You should see Sloper and Cried. They are pathetic, even worse than I am. He held a great sign. I don't know why Angelina won't just let me resign. It's because you are good when you are on form, that's why, said Harry irritably. He found it very hard to be sympathetic to Ron's plight when he himself would have given almost anything to be playing in forthcoming match against Hufflepuff. Ron seemed to be noticed Harry's turn because he did not mention which again during breakfast, and there was a slight frosting in the way they said goodbye to each other shortly afterward. Ron, desperate for the quit speech, said to Harry after attempting to flatten the hair while staring at the reflection in the back of the teaspoon protected along to the entrance hall to meet Chow, feeling very apprehensive and wondering that on earth they were going to talk about. She was waiting for him a little to side of a work front door, looking very pretty, and her hair tied back in the long ponytail. Harry's feet seemed to be too big for his body as he walked toward her, and he was suddenly horribly aware of his arm and how stupid they looked swinging at her side. "Hi," said Chow slightly breathlessly. "Hi," said Harry. They stared at each other for a moment. Then Harry said, "Well, shall we go then?" "Oh yes." They joined this queue of people being sighing, out of which occasionally catching each other's eye and grinning shiftily, but not talking too much either. Harry was relieved when they reached the fresh air, finding it easier to walk along in silence than just stand there looking awkward. It was a fresh, breezy sort of day, and as they passed the Quidditch stadium, Harry glimpsed Ron and Ginny skimming over at stands and felt a horrible pang that he was not up there within them. "You really missed it, don't you?" said Chow. He looked around and saw her watching him. "Yeah," sighed Harry. "I do. Remember the first time we played against each other in third year?" she asked him. "Yeah," said Harry, grinning. "You kept blocking me, and Wood told you not to be gentleman and knock me off my broom if you had to," said Chow, smiling reminiscently. "I heard he got taken on by Pride of Poetry. Is that right?" "Nah, it was Puddlemere United. I saw him that World Cup last year." "Oh, I saw you there, remember? We were on the same campsite. It was really good, wasn't it?" The subject of which World Cup cap carried them all the way down the drive and out through the gates. Harry could hardly believe how easy it was to talk to her. No more difficult, in fact, than talking to Ron and Hermione, and he was just staring to feel confident and cheerful when a large gang of Slytherin girls passed them, including Pansy Parkinson. Potter and Chang screamed Pansy to a chorus of sniggle giggle. "Chang, I don't think much of your taste. At least Degree was good looking." They spent up talking and shrinking in a pointed fashion, with many exaggerated glance back at Harry and Chow, leaving an embarrassed silence in their wake. Harry could think of nothing else to say about Quidditch, and Chow, slightly flustered, was watching her feet. "So, where do you want to go?" Harry asked as they entered Hogsmeade. The high street was full of students ambling up and down, peering into the sloped windows and meeting about together and pavement. "Oh, I don't mind," said Chow, struggling. Shall we just have a look in stop or something?" They wandered toward Davish and Banks, a large poster, and been stuck up in the window, and a few Hogsmeade were looking at it. They moved aside when Harry and Chow approached, and Harry found himself staring at one more, at the 10 picture of the Escape Death Eaters. The poster, by order of the Ministry of Magic, offered 1,000 gallons reward to any witch or wizard with information relating to recapture of any of the convict picture. "It's funny, isn't it?" said Chow in her low voice, along gazing up at the picture of the Death Eater. "Remember when that Sirius Black escaped, and there were Dementors all over Oxford looking for him, and now 10 Death Eaters are on the loose, and there aren't Dementors anywhere." "Yes," said Harry, tearing his eyes away from Bellatrix's strange face to glance up and down the high street. "Yes, it is weird." He was not sorry that there were no Dementors nearby, but now he came to think of it, their absence was highly significant. They had not only let the Death Eaters escape, they were not bothering to look for them. It looked as though they really were outside Ministry's control. The 10 escaped Death Eaters were staring out of every shop window he had chow past. It started to rain as they passed. Screaming shouts, cold heavy drop of water kept hitting Harry's face and the back of his neck. Do you want to get coffee? Said Chow tentatively as the rain began to fall more heavily. Yeah, alright, said Harry looking around there. Oh, there is a really nice place just as there. Haven't you ever been to Madame Put food, she said brightly, and she set him up a slight road and into a small tea shop that Harry would have noticed before. It was cramped, steam, little place where everything seemed to have been decorated with frill or boughs. Harry was reminding unpleasantly to Umbridge of his "Cute, isn't it?" said Chow happily. "Oh, yeah," said Harry, untruthfully looking. "She decorated in for Valentine's Day," said Chow, indicating a number of golden cherubs that were hovering over each packed small, circular table, occasionally throwing pink confetti over the occupant. They sat down at the last remaining table, which was situated in this teeny window. Roger Davies, the round-clothes coach captain, was sitting about a foot and a half away with a pretty blonde girl. They were holding hands. The sight made Harry feel uncomfortable, particularly when looking around the tea shop. He saw that it was full of nothing but couples, all of them holding hands. Perhaps Chow couldn't expect him to hold her hand. "What can I get you, dear?" said Madame Putford, very short woman with a shiny blonde bun squeezing between their table and Roger Davis with a great difficulty. "Two coffee, please," said Chow. In the time it took for their coffee to arrive, Roger Davis and his girlfriend started kissing over their sugar bowl. Harry wished they wouldn't. He felt that Davis was setting a standard with Chow could soon expect him to compete. He felt his face growing hot and tried staring out of window, but it was to steam up. He could not see the street outside. To postpone the moment when he had to look at Chow, he started up at the ceiling as though examining the paintwork and revived a handful confetti in the face from their hovering cherub. After a few more painful minutes, Chow mentioned Umbridge. Harry seized on the subject with relief, and they passed a few happy moments abusing her. But the subject had already been so thoroughly canvassed during DA meeting, it did not last very long. Silence fell again. Harry was very conscious so of slurring noise coming from the table next door and cast wildly around for something else to say. "Listen, do you want to come with me to the Three Broomstick at lunchtime? I am meeting Hermione Granger there." Chow raised her eyebrows. "You are meeting Hermione Granger today?" "Yeah, well, she asked me to, so I thought I would. Do you want to come with me?" she said. "It wouldn't matter if you did." "Oh, well, that was nice to her." But Chow did not sound as though she thought it was nice at all. On the contrary, her tone was cold, and all of a sudden she looked rather forbidding. A few more minutes passed in a total silence, Harry drinking his coffee so fast that he would soon need to fresh out. Next door, Robert Davis and his girlfriend seemed gulped together by the lips. Chow's hand was lying on the table beside her coffee, and Harry was feeling a mount pressure to take hold of it. "Just do it," he told himself as a font of mingled panic and excitement surged inside his chest. Just reach out of the grab. Amazing how much more difficult it was to extend his arm 12-inch and touch her hand than to snatch a speeding snatch from midair. But just as he moved his hand forward, Chow looked her off the table. He was now watching Robert Davis kissing his girlfriend with a mildly interested expression. He asked me out, she said in a quiet voice a couple of weeks ago. Roger, I turned him down, though. Harry, who had grabbed the sugar bowl to excuse his sudden lunging movement across the table, could not think why she was telling him this. If she wished she were sitting at the table next door, being heartily kissed by Roger Davies, why had she agreed to come out with me? He said nothing. There, Cherub threw another handful of confetti over them. Some of it landed in the last cold drink of the coffee Harry had been about to drink. I came here with Cedric last year, said Shaw. In the second or so it took for him to take in what she had said. Harry's inside had become glacial. He could not believe she wanted to talk about Cedric now. While kissing couples surrounded them and a cherub floated over their heads, Chow's voice was rather higher when she spoke again. I have been meaning to ask you for ages. Did Cedric, did he mention me at all before he died? This was crazy. This was very last subject on the earth Harry wanted to discuss. At least of all with Chow. Well, no, he said quietly. There wasn't time for him to say anything. So do you get to see a lot of beach in the holidays? You support the tornadoes, right? His voice sounded flashily bright and cheery. To his horror, he saw that her eyes were swimming with tears again, just as they had been after the last DA meeting before Christmas. Look, he said desperately, leaning in so that nobody else could overhear. Let's not talk about Cedric right now. Let's talk about something else. But there was quite the wrong thing to say. I thought, she said, tears pattering down onto the table. I thought you had understand. I need to talk about it. Surely you need to talk about it too. I mean, you saw it happen, didn't you? Everything was going nightmarishly wrong. August Davis' girlfriend had ever ungulged herself to look around at Chow crying. Well, I have talked about it, said Harry in a whisper to Ron and Hermione, but oh, you'll talk to Hermione Granger, she said cheerily. Her face now shining with tears, and several more kissing couples broke apart to stare. But you won't talk to me. Perhaps it would be best if you just paid and you went and meet up with Hermione Granger like you obviously want to. Harry stared at her, utterly bewildered, as she seized as pearly napkin and tapped at her shining face with it. Ciao, he said weakly, wishing Robert would seize his girlfriend and start kissing her again to stop her googling at him and Ciao. Go on leave, she said, now crying into napkin. I don't know why you asked me out in the first place if you are going to make arrangements to meet other girls right after me. How many are you meeting after Harmony? It's not like that, said Harry, and he was so relieved at finally understanding what she was annoyed about that he laughed, which he realized a split second too late was a mistake. Chow sprang to her feet. The whole tier room was quiet and everybody was watching them now. I'll see you around, Harry, she said dramatically, and hiccuping slightly, she dashed to the door, wrenched it open, and hurried into the pouring rain. Now, Harry called after her, but the door had already swung shut behind her with a turnful tinkle. There There was total silence in the tea shop. Every eye was upon Harry. He threw a gallon down into the table, shook pink coffee out of his eye, and followed Chow out of the door. It was raining hard now, and she was nowhere to be seen. He simply did not understand what had happened. Half an hour ago, they had been getting along fine. Woman, he muttered angrily, sloshing down the rain-washed street with his hand in his pocket. What did she want to talk about Cedric for anyway? What does she always want to drag up a subject that make her act like a human? He turned right and broke into a splashy rain, and within a minute he was turning into doorway of three broomsticks. He knew he was too early to meet Harmony, but he thought it likely there would be someone in there with whom he could spend the interviewing time. He shook his wet hair out of his eyes and shook around. Hagrid was sitting alone in the corner looking morose. Hagrid, he said, when he had squeezed through the round table and pulled up a chair beside him. Hagrid jumped and looked down at Harry as though he barely recognized him. Harry saw that he had two flesh cut on his face and several new braids. Oh, it's you, Harry, said Hagrid. You all right? Yeah, I am fine, lied Harry. In fact, next to his battered and mournful-looking Hagrid, he felt he did not have much to complain about. Oh, are you okay? Me, said Hagrid. Oh yeah, I'm grand. I grand. He gazed into the depth of his pure tankard, which was the size of a large bucket, and sighed. Harry did not know what to say to him. They sat side by side in silence for a moment. Then Hagrid said abruptly, "In the same boat, you and me, are we, Harry?" Said Harry. "Yeah, I've said it before. Both outsiders, like," said Hagrid, nodding wisely, "and both orphan. Yeah, both orphan." He looked a great swing from the tankard. "Make a difference having a decent family," he said. "Me dad was decent, and your mom and dad were decent. If they had lived life, wouldn't been different." Yeah, I suppose," said Harry cautiously. Hagrid seemed to be in a very strange mood. "Family," said Hagrid gloomily. "Whatever you say, that's important." And he wiped a trickle of it out of his eyes. "Hagrid," said Harry, unable to stop himself, "where are you getting all these injuries?" "Oh," said Hagrid, looking startled. "What injuries?" "All those," said Harry, pointing at Hagrid's face. "Oh, that's just normal bumps and brushes," said Hagrid dismissively. "I got a rough job." "A drain this tankard, set it back upon the table, and go to his feet. I'll be seeing you, Harry. Take care now." And he lumbered out of the pub looking wrenched and then disappeared into a torrential rain. Harry watched him go, feeling miserable. Hagrid was unhappy and he was hiding something, but he seemed determined not to accept help. What was going on? But before Harry could think about the matter any further, he heard a voice calling his name. "Harry! Harry over here!" Hermione was waving at him from the other side of the room. He got up and made his way toward her, though the crowded pub. He was still a few tables away when he realized that Hermione was not alone. She was sitting at a table with the unlikeliest pair of drinking mates he could ever have imagined. Luna Lovegood and none other than Rita Skeeter, ex-journalist of Daily Prophet and other Hermione's least favorite people in the world. "You're early," said Hermione, moving along to give him room to sit down. "I thought you were with Chow. I wasn't expecting you for another hour at least." "Chow," said Rita at once, twisting around in her seat to stare wildly at Harry. "A girl." She snatched up her crocodile skin handbag and groped within it. "It's none of your business. If Harry's been with 100 of girls," Hermione told Rita coolly, "so you can put that away right now." Rita had been on the point of withdrawing an acid green quill from her bag, looking as though she had been forced to swallow Sting's cap. She snapped her bag shut again. "What are you up to?" Harry asked, sitting down and staring from Rita to Luna to Hermione. "Little Miss Perfect was just about to tell me when you arrived," said Rita, taking a large slurp of her drink. "I suppose I'm allowed to talk to him. I am." She nodded at Hermione. "Yes, I suppose you are," said Hermione coldly. Unemployment did not suit Rita. The hair that had once been set in elaborate curls now hung tank and unkempt around her face. The scarlet paint on her 2-inch talons was chipped, and there were a couple of false jewels missing from her winged glasses. She took another great gulp of her drink and said, out of corner of her mouth, "Pretty girl, is she, Harry?" One more word about Harry's love life and the deals of "And that's the promise," said Hermione irritably. "What deal?" said Rita, wiping her mouth on the back of her hand. "You haven't mentioned a deal yet, Miss Prissy. You just told me to turn up. Oh, one of these days." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Yes, yes, one of these days you'll write more horrible stories about Harry and me," said Harmony indifferently. "Find someone who cares, why don't you?" "They have run plenty of horrible stories about Harry this year without my help," said Rita, shooting a sideways look at him over the top of her glass and adding in a tough whisper, "How has that made you feel, Harry? Betrayed, distraught, misunderstood?" "He feels angry, of course," said Hermione in a hard, clear voice, "because he is not told the Ministry of Magic the truth, and the Ministry is too much of an idiot to believe him. So you actually stick to it, do you? That he, who must not be named, is back," said Rita, lowering her glasses and subjecting Harry to a piercing stare while her fingers stayed lingering to the claps for the crocodile bag. "You stand by all this garbage Dumbledore's been telling everybody about you know who returning, and you being the sole witness." "I wasn't the sole witness," sneered Harry. "There were a dozen odd Death Eaters there as well. Weren't their names? I had loved them," breathed Rita, now fumbling in her bag once more and gazing at him as though he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. A great bold headline, "Potter accused," a subheading, "Harry Potter's name, Death Eater still among us," and when beneath a nice big photograph of you, disturbed teenage survivor of you know whose attack, Harry Potter 15 caused outrage yesterday by accusing respectable and prominent member of Wizardian community of being Death Eaters. A quick quill was actually in her hand and halfway to her mouth when the rapturous expression died out of her face. "But of course," she said, lowering the quill and looking daggers at Hermione, "Little Miss Perfect wouldn't want that story out there, will she?" "As a matter of fact," said Hermione sweetly, "that's exactly what Little Miss Perfect does want." Rita stared at her. So did Harry. Luna, on the other hand, swung Weasley is arcing dreamily under her breath and stirred her drink with a cocktail onion on the stick. "You want me to report what he says about he who must not be named?" Rita asked Hermione in a hushed voice. "Yes, I do," said Hermione, "the truth story. All the facts exactly as Harry reported them. He'll give you all the details. He'll tell you the names of undiscovered Death Eaters he saw there. He'll tell you what Voldemort looks like now. Oh, get a grip of yourself," she added contemptuously, throwing a napkin across the table, for at the sound of Voldemort's name Rita had jumped so badly that she had slopped half her glass of fire whiskey down herself. Rita bloated the front of her grubby raincoat, still staring at Hermione. Then she said badly, "The Prophet wouldn't print it." In case you haven't noticed, nobody believes his coke and bull story. Everyone thinks he is delusional. Now, if you let me write the story from the angle, we don't need another story about how Harry's lost his marbles, said Harmony angrily. We have had plenty of those already, thank you. I want him give the opportunity to tell the truth. There is no market for the story like that, said Rita coldly. You mean the prophet won't print it because Fudge won't let them, said Harry irritably. Rita gave Harmony a long hard look. Then leaning forward across the table toward her, she said in a businesslike tone, all right, Fudge is leaning on the prophet, but it comes to the same thing. They won't print a story that show Harry in a good light. Nobody wants to read it. It's against the public mood. This last Azkaban breakout has got people quite worried enough. People just don't want to believe you know who is bad. So the prophet exists to tell people what they want to hear, does it? Said Harmony scathingly. Rita sat up straight again, her eyebrow raised and drained her glasses of fire whiskey. The prophet exists to sell itself, you silly girl, she said coldly. My dad thinks it's an awful paper, said Luna, chipping into the conversation unexpectedly, sucking on her pale onion. She gazed at Rita with her enormous, protuberant, slight, mad eyes. He publishes important stories that he thinks the public need to know. He doesn't care about making money. Rita looked despairingly at Luna. I'm guessing your father runs some stupid little village newsletter. She said 25 ways to mingle with muggles and the date of the next bring and fly sale. No, said Luna, dipping her onion back into the gilly water. He is the editor of the Quibbler. Rita snorted too loudly that people at the nearby table looked around in alarm. Important stories, he think the public need to know, she said witteringly. I could manure my garden with the content of that track. Well, this is your chance to raise the tone of it a bit, isn't it? Said Harmony pleasantly. Luna says her father's quite happy to take Harry's interview. That's who'll be publishing it. Rita stared at them both for a moment and then let out a great whoop of laughter. The quibbler, she said, cackling. You think people will take him seriously if he is published in the Quibbler? Some people won't, said Harmony in a level voice, but the Daily Prophet version of the Azkaban Breakout has some gaping hole in it. I think a lot of people will be wondering whether there isn't a better explanation of what happened and if there is an alternative story available, even if it is published in. She glanced sideways at Luna in a well, an unusual magazine. I think they might be rather keen to read it. Rita did not say anything for a while, but eyed Harmony shrewdly, her head a little to one side. Alright, let's say for a moment I'll do if she said abruptly. What kind of fee I'm going to get? I don't think that I exactly pay people to write for magazines. Said Luna timidly. They do it because it's an honor and of course to see their names in print. Rita Skeeter looked as though the taste of a sphinx cap was wrong in her mouth. Again as she rounded I'm supposed said Harmony calmly, taking a sip of her drink. Otherwise, as you very well know, I will inform the authorities that you are an unregistered animagus. Of course, the prophet might give you rather a lot of an insider account of life in Azkaban. Rita looked as though she would have liked nothing better than to seize the paper umbrella sticking out of Harmony's drink and thrust it up her nose. I don't suppose I have got any choice, have I? Said Rita, her voice shaking slightly. She opened her crocodile bag once more, withdrew a piece of parchment, and raised her quick coat quill. Daddy will be pleased to say, Luna brightly, a muscle twitched in Rita's jaw. Okay, Harry, said Hermione, turning to him, ready to tell the public the truth. I suppose, said Harry, watching Rita balancing the coat quill at the ready on the parchment between them. Fire away, then, Rita, said Hermione, sternly fishing a cherry out of the bottom of her glass. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.